Wow, I can't believe America has been around for 2022 years. Gaming in the current year is my annual wrap-up to go over all the games I played within the calendar year. That may sound like a lot, but there are some exceptions. If I have already made a video about it, it won't go here because, duh. Games are not specifically going to be games released in the current year because who the hell has time to play new releases? And I'm going to omit any fighting games, unless maybe it's a new release I really want to talk about. So one of the games I played this year has to be the GOTY of 2022. Let's frickin' get into it, dog.
Steiner, let me welcome you back.
Oh, Team 3D, you guys are out of your mind. Coming to Atlanta, Georgia, the place that the Steiner brothers got their start in professional wrestling. You guys are out of your mind, making it a table match, because tonight we're going to beat you at your own game. And after it's all said and done, you're going to be taking splinters out of your fat asses all night long because you got some fat asses. The only chance you have no chance, but you had a chance, is that you can run lickety-split. You can't run because you got the fat asses. And after it's done, we're going to have a tailgate party for all my freaks out there in Atlanta, Georgia.
I think this marks the first time I've ever gotten into a popular MOBA game on the ground floor of its release. Nikke, Goddess of Victory is a titty witch gacha game that kinda plays like Time Crisis and reads if someone was trying to recreate Nier Automata but pretty much only looked at 2B's ass cheeks during their gameplay. I'm not really one to go chasing the JPEG casino, but of all things, it was the gameplay in Nikke that interested me the most. I mean the gameplay.
Fat asses!
I don't have a whole ton of experience with MOBA game because D4DJ was the only one I ever meaningfully played, so forgive me if I paint with too wide a brush, but Jesus Christ, there are so many systems. I feel like MOBA game of this ilk is more about sifting through the chaff to find the systems and resources that actually matter impactfully. Like, does my equipment really change things? How relevant is weapon diversity in my squad truly going to be? Elemental weaknesses are likely a real deal game changer, so I should probably pay attention to that. What consumables are the ones that I should freely use, and what are the ones I should be saving up? The onboarding of these systems feel rapid fire, not necessarily confusing, but bloated in how it's all presented. It's not apparent what is the cream that rises to the top in importance. You have to suss that all out for yourself as you play, which isn't a particularly fun or engaging feeling. And what strangely compounds this is that Nikke, likely by design of its genre, feels caught between a game you physically play and a game you set to auto. The actual gunplay battles are quite fun. I think a lot of the feedback on firing feels really weighty and is pleasing, and it leads to things like the sniper rifle being legitimately enjoyable to use. The flip side to this is that if you just click on both auto functions, the game kinda just plays better than if you were manually controlling it. And it's not hard to see why. As much as the act of shooting is kinesthetically fun, the targets you are shooting feel like incomprehensible fodder. You have the option to force your entire squad to take cover, but rarely does it feel like you see a threat worth doing that for. In fact, rarely do you see a threat other than the destroyable missiles or the energy bomb salvos. And maybe most relevantly advantageous, playing on auto means people can immediately start firing when something slides on screen because the field of view is pretty narrow. The bulk of encounters are frankly not engaging, which leads itself to the idea that you build your squad to have a big enough number and you just auto battle through the game. At least until you hit something that it doesn't let you auto battle through, like the EX battle. This is where the weird friction shows up, because to tackle these challenging boss battles, you need to be versed enough in the play of the game, which the majority of the battles elsewhere doesn't prioritize. This isn't bad. Like, I wouldn't want to see this gone, but it feels like it's attempting to serve two masters at the same time. And speaking of masters, let's talk about the writing. Nikke is one of the worst written games I've played in a while. It does such a bad job of addressing its world building and characterization that I have an incredibly hard time figuring out how everything slots into the world. A couple missions in, your commanding officer Anderson, who I am constantly trying to parse how he feels about you, exiles you from the main location, the Ark, into the desolate outskirts known as the Outpost. I'm pretty sure this is disguised as an act of punishment. I swear I remember the term exile being applied, and your party members talk about the outpost as if it's a wasteland, but the overworld map makes it look as idyllic as a Pokemon town, and the story routinely allows you and your party back to the Ark. The main campaign plot is so messy and rushed feeling that it becomes my least favorite part of the game to interact with. In the story, Nikkes are cybernetic / robotic humanoids of some make, but it's not apparent where their humanity always ends and when their cybernetics always begins. They seemingly don't need to eat, drink, or sleep, but N102 loves croquettes, Anise steals all your soda, and Uni falls asleep on you. They seemingly do not need to use the bathroom, likely tied to not actually needing to eat, but Anise warns you that you are dangerously close to her ripping ass in your face.
I warned you not to be lippy when you're in the line of fire!
This inconsistency extends to characterization. Maiden is the perfect example. Her in-game barks make her sound cold, disconnected, and otherwise apathetic. Her episode and blah blah writing makes her a messy gamer girl who falls in puppy dog love with you over the barest of niceties. There's no cohesion between these aspects of her personality. It feels like different people taking attempts at writing her. And, you know, I'm not dumb. I get that the game is sacrificing continuity and consistency for humor more often than not, but it makes it feel absolutely impossible to care about anything or anyone other than Anise. Anise carries this game on her back. She rules. And that's kind of the guiding idea behind the writing. It's at its best when every Nikke is dumber than a sack of bricks and as smooth as the burlap sack they came in. Outside of Rappy, who is the necessary straight man, most characters range from naive dolt to thank God you are not human or you would have died accidentally choking on your tongue. As much as I'm dogging the game's text, it's what keeps me hooked. I kind of love bad writing. Like I have a very professional wrestling take on things. Either be really good or really bad, but never be boring. The constant perplexity of where Nikke is stretching its edges is kind of engaging to watch, and I really can't overstate how much it is held together by Anise just being the fucking best. She's so funny in this game, and carries everything on her back. And it's not like the game is all drizzling shit, it occasionally sticks the landing with a story beat or a character in a legitimately enjoyable way. Nikke is a fun game to have installed and boot up in my free time, as it offers me a lot of really good things to engage with, and a lot of really bad things to engage with, both being entertaining, which is all I'm looking for. Oh, and the music slaps. The following will involve minor spoilers for Dark Souls 3, like bosses or cutscenes. As this series is known for its mystery and exploratory elements, I felt the need to address that up front, and if you don't want to see moments from this game, give you time to skip to the next section. I am going to be honest. I have never heard anyone say anything about Dark Souls 3. For the longest time, I just assumed it was like a middling black sheep of the series. Like, I'm on record as disliking Dark Souls 2, but I know a large group of people love that game, so at least it has its vocal defenders. But 3, I've literally never heard shit about it. So because of that, I came in with like really low expectations of the game. And for a while, I don't think I was entirely wrong to do so. Dark Souls 3 feels like it's chasing its predecessor's tail a bit. There's this thin coat of paint over the Dark Souls tropes. The Ashen are talked about in the same tone as Hollows were. You immediately find out that you have to collect the souls of 4 big powerful dudes. And then in some cases, the paint didn't even stick, like how Anri is wearing Oscar's armor. And sure, yes, she's from Astoria like Oscar was, so there's an explanation there. But then like you get dead-ass Sigmire of Katarina back again. Like literally Sigmire, as you know him from Dark Souls 1, is in this game. And it's a little weird and on the nose feeling. In the actual game, it doesn't feel like it's getting off to its best start. The first couple zones feel very linear, like there's this nice sprawl to the level, but there's this lack of interconnectedness that the way Dark Souls 1 had pretty much right out of the gate. Ever so slightly compounding this is that I, for the first time, started with a dex build instead of a strength build, and Dark Souls 3 just hands you what I can only assume is the best dex weapon in the game, the Twin Swords, as a starting weapon. So like, you are off to the races immediately. It was fine. It was a totally acceptable Dark Souls experience. And then I got to the Cathedral of the Deep, and Dark Souls 3 kicked into high fucking gear. This might be the best Souls level I've ever played. This massive cathedral and exterior area that has multiple paths leading back to the lone bonfire at its base, all of which feel perfectly paced and fairly spaced out, and most importantly, exciting to explore and find. This level just keeps going, from tooling around the outside of the cathedral to running up on the roofing to exploring its massive interior with these awesome two giants that roam its center. There are so many different ways to interact with this level that serve as a massive step up in quality from the more cut and dry level expressions beforehand. And then from there, it is all gas. Dark Souls 3 starts pulling out the stops with some of the most breathtaking locales I've ever seen. There are exploratory vistas that make me halt my movement and just gaze out into the world, most of which is eventually explorable, and soak in just how beautiful it all looks. You start getting these insanely evocative pieces, like these unnaturally long female frozen tree things that instantly grab your attention, only to eventually be an enemy later in the level. And what's the deal with this bug guy over here in the corner? There's something cold and unexplainable about him. And then you traverse further and meet this massive wolf who stands proud in the distance and engages me when I get too close. Is he defending his land for me? I don't know, but my mind starts racing with what's going on. This is where Dark Souls 3 sinks its hooks into you. I like Bloodborne a lot, but I think it had some rough edges to it. The upgrade in console technology allowed for a higher amount of fidelity, but sometimes it just felt like object chaff to make the ground feel less empty. Dark Souls 3 has no such issue. Areas feel alive, or at the very least, felt alive, and you could easily get lost in looking at all the architecture and detail that went into the levels. Like, who is this guy slowly walking around? He is this breath of calmness as he slowly walks through the plaza before you continue on your journey to be assaulted by the most graceful and horrific creatures the world can offer. Like, what the fuck is this, and why is it scarier than anything in Bloodborne? Dark Souls 3 is my favorite Soulsborne game, and I don't even think it's close. Outside of how it kind of stumbles out of the gate, this game is phenomenal. Every new experience I had in the game was one that was so impressive, so evocative, that I couldn't help just constantly be bowled over by how much I was in love with the game. I don't replay games very often, but I could see myself doing another run with Dark Souls 3 with a strength build or something. It's just so good, and especially coming in with highly tempered expectations, I left Dark Souls 3 just floored by the game. Holy shit, this was so goddamn good. If you like world building, both lore-wise and physical, it is absolutely worth spinning through Dark Souls 3. I have not played Yu-Gi-Oh! Since before I was a teen. At the time of writing, I am 32. I was there as a young lad on the ground floor of Yu-Gi-Oh's TCG start, and while it was a fad that passed on me, not being helped by accidentally leaving my cards in a hotel on vacation in Myrtle Beach, I did stick with TCGs and was a Magic the Gathering fan after that. As an adult, I recut my teeth on MTG with the release of Theros, played Standard for a number of years, and left once the price of Standard became just as high as the fucking price of Modern. Outside of the occasional EDH game and a fun Pauper-adjacent format called $20, I was out at TCGs again. I did not at all care for playing Magic Online, as it just felt like this bastardization of the human element I enjoyed so much. And then Master Duel released, and for a couple weeks, it was the only thing I saw my friends talk about. I had no idea that so many people were into Yu-Gi-Oh! I was experiencing the worst case of FOMO I could imagine. The game was only out on PC and consoles, and I knew that the only way I was going to have time to play was on mobile. So for the first almost month of the game, I went out of my mind wanting to join my friends on the hot new game and satiated myself the best I could by studying as much as possible about modern Yu-Gi-Oh! When it finally came to mobile, I was simply floored. I had kind of known that Yu-Gi-Oh! Was this game known for one-turn kills, if not first-turn kills, and I had wrongly assumed that this was a product of power creep and balancing. But the way Yu-Gi-Oh! Is structured, it's the logical conclusion to how the game would be played. Let me explain coming to Yu-Gi-Oh! As a Magic player. Magic is no holy bastion of fair and balanced formats, but the mana system hard-codes a certain tempo to the game. You need to use mana to play cards, and you can only add one mana to your pool per turn. The entire game is based around how you approach this resource curve. Do you attempt to focus on the low end of the curve and overwhelm your opponent with aggression? Do you defend yourself until you have a high resource pool and then control the pace of the game? This constant to how Magic operates is one of the most defining laws about how the game plays out, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Does not have that. Well, it kinda has that. You can only normal summon one monster per turn, but that's such a low bar to hop over. Because you do not have this universal resource tax on playing your cards, you are, in theory, the most powerful on your first turn. There's nothing stopping you from playing spells and traps and special summoning monsters other than unique micro restrictions the cards can enact to try and control the chaos. As the game goes on, you are realistically going to play more cards than you can normally draw, meaning that over time the amount of options at your disposal is less and less. Obviously, this isn't always the case, as many decks have different ways to circumvent this entropic nature of play, but it's worth noting that unlike Magic, where your opening hand is a gaze into your future, in Yu-Gi-Oh! The opening hand is the present, and it is live from Jump Street. It's all gas, no brakes. But also because of this, a massive well of complexity opens up. Because you start with all these live options, it becomes a fight against yourself to properly execute your game plan, and it can be fucking difficult to do so correctly. This isn't to say Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't an interactive game. Hello, Assblast and Joyosoyus. But that half the battle is properly building your port state before you even know what your opponent could possibly be playing. The other aspect of complexity is that Yu-Gi-Oh! Does not split up formats the way Magic does. It's all one eternal format with trimming done by the ban list. This means that there is a nearly unfathomable amount of knowledge checks for new players with massive amounts of potential decks you could run into. Sure, you could look over the top 20 most relevant decks or so, but what are you gonna do when someone runs up on you with Drytron? Pull out the fucking combo chart and study it before the turn counter ends? Unless you have a fucking PhD, I don't think so, my dude. It's so daunting for someone re-entering the game for what is realistically the first time, but it's also this exciting wild west of unexplored options. It helps that Master Duel as a client is really good. Everything I've said up until now is about Yu-Gi-Oh! The base card game, but Master Duel, the actual game experience, rules. It animates great, it has exciting cut-ins for big-time important monsters or effects, and I cannot compliment the soundtrack enough. This combination of Middle Eastern sounds and key scales combines with low-intensity tension like you would hear in the Jagged Alliance 2 menu music. It's so good that I do not want to play with the sound off. The audio aspect really adds something, I swear. There's also this bountiful amount of solo content as you have these little deck/archetype explanation thingies. I'm not sure how many of these really lead to decks you could realistically take on ranked, but there are a lot of them. You get good resources from them, and anything that can help onboard people a little bit is helpful because there's really no deck tech tutorial in here, and I can't even blame them for it. Master Duel is by no means perfect. Being a best of one format makes deck building decisions like sideboarding irrelevant. There has been a middling effort of support from Konami for the clients. Max C is at 3 until the heat death of the universe, fucking help me. But it is the easiest way to be playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And it seems to have done its job in getting a lot of people back into the game, myself included. Wow, is it comfy to boot up my fat ass PS2 again. As much as I eternally resent this system for killing my precious child, the Dreamcast, the PS2 is video gaming's greatest generation. Dark Cloud falls on the side of the platform where it was still in its early days, still a little bit rough and tumble, still feeling out where it was gonna go, and lacking in the detail and polish that games towards the end of the lifespan would have. Just look at Dark Cloud 2 as an example. But in that innocence, there is this serenity. It's something really wonderful to look back on. Dark Cloud 1 came out mad early in the system's lifespan, and you can really feel that learning to crawl before you walk primitiveness permeate throughout the game. And I'm hoping this isn't nostalgia talking, but I kinda like that. I like how weirdly empty the game is, how visually boring so many of the spaces are, how little emphasis story and characters end up getting. It's a game that is so totally crunchy mechanics first and foremost that all the additional fluff and sparkle was never prioritized. Strangely enough, it feels like a spruced up N64 game. When I think PS1, I think more about jagged edges and incredibly dense JRPGs. In that comparison, the softer textures and more limited character interactions feel somewhat more in line with a Nintendo product. Dark Cloud is this awesome spiritual successor to ActRaiser shoved into a 3D Legend of Zelda game. You do some D, C dungeon crawling to advance the story, and get the building blocks to put the towns you visit back together. And that's it. There's so little narrative or plotting going on that the majority of the game is mechanical expression. It's fun putting these villages back together, and even if all the inhabitants are one-note characters, there is this comforting charm in watching everything start to take shape. Sure, you get a little cutscene when someone's house is fully rebuilt, but they are usually so inconsequential that I wouldn't count them as story or anything. And so, because of that, the joy is kind of something you make of it yourself, if that makes sense. Because it's not this grand ordeal in putting these lives back on track, you have your own internal warmth of rebuilding that acts as a reward. I don't know how to describe it. It's oddly super comfy. Let me try and dissect this feeling a different way. I was at the right age in the world to be the kid who opened up the N64 at Christmas. As much as N64 Christmases are a mimetic touchstone of gaming's culture, I can't overstate how important it was to see gaming wholesale transform into the third dimension. I talked about it somewhere in my top 5 runner-up video a bit, so check that out if you want more discussion on that paradigm shift. But the N64 ignited a level of wonder and awe in video games that can't ever really be replicated for me. The specific example I want to link back to in Dark Cloud 1 is that when I, a young Babu, the age 7, would play Mario Kart 64's Rainbow Road, I would impersonate the characters in the sky as constellations. I gave each of them the voices the game told me they had, and would verbally pretend that they were cheering me on in my race. Unless they were Bowser or Wario, those dudes would absolutely pray for my downfall. Something about Dark Cloud 1 reminds me of that experience, taking aspects of the game in no way meant to invoke that creativity and feeling, and giving them personal life to bolster my own time with the game. Dungeons, on the other hand, are much less comfy. In fact, they are a bit of a constant pain in my ass. Unlike the city building, running through dungeons is a prickly battle. It's very old school dungeon crawling insofar as the amount of mechanics you are balancing. Sure, you need to track your weapon's health to make sure it doesn't break and you lose all your hard work in upgrading it, but also thirst is dumb and just adds additional tax onto the game. You don't perform any better or anything when not thirsty. You just have to keep on top of thirst, otherwise you start taking damage. Also, unlike weapon durability, thirst eventually stops being a thing that matters, only ever impacting you early in the game and then being a null mechanic once you hit the halfway point. The game also gives you an eventual party of 6, but there is a shockingly large amount of friction in this. For starters, most allies aren't exactly super fun to play with. The game doesn't have a robust combat system or anything, so some characters are just kinda boring. Predominantly the melee characters who are not Tone. This blows when you get to a floor that is limited to someone like Ungaga only, and now he's plonking a dragon for minor damage a billion times over to clear the dungeon, and exhausting so many resources in doing so. Worse so, Tone, the main character, is the only person who can open the party balls that have all the city building assets in them, so unless you want to briefly switch to him 7 times in one floor, it's best to just play as Tone and leave all the other allies as assist calls when you need their specific abilities. I don't want to do that because I want to keep my whole party relevantly leveled, but sometime I would just feel this, fuck it, I should just play as Tone the whole floor feeling. As a whole, it's not particularly bad, but it is very clunky and it has that certain old school flair of the frustration being an integral part of the intended experience. The flip side to this is that advancement through the dungeons is paced in such a manner that feels very welcoming in today's day and age. I'm in my 30s and I don't have time to couch lock and poop sock hours into a game anymore. Because Dark Cloud is so lacking in narrative you need to keep track of, it's very easy to sit down, spend 15 minutes or so cranking out a level, and then go about your day. There's a story, but it bookends the game, and everything between are these small-scale tales that go down really easy. As you progress through the game, there's this rewarding feeling of avatar strength. Resources become less costly, your weapons start hitting for way more, By the time the last dungeon comes around, it still has its challenges, but you can mostly cruise through it if you're leveled up. It's a comfortable pace that feels so easy to come back to after a week or so of not being able to play. And something that adds to that comfortable pace of play is the music. God, it's just so old school fantasy video game. It's so beautiful and serene and peaceful that it paints this game in this calming atmosphere. Put my finger on why the vibe is so strong. Like, yes, it has the warmth of the game from ages past, but even games in the style that came before, like Ocarina of Time, are infinitely more advanced than this. But yet something about this game grabbed me and never let go. Dark Cloud is such a throwback, and even if some parts of that throwback feel like they should be left in the past, the whole of the game was one of the most impactful games I played this year. It complemented my schedule perfectly. It reminded me of the styles of old. It was incredibly comfy to sit down and play, and it was more of a joy to play today than it was back when the PS2 was current. I can't recommend revisiting this game enough. I had such a good time every instance of sitting down and turning on my old CRT. And if that recording looks a little weird, that's because I don't have the greatest retro recording setup. Send help in the comments, please. Also, before we go, I put out a video on my secondary channel as one of those like lo-fi music to chill and relax thingy-dingies. I don't believe I've ever talked about my secondary channel in the video yet, but I have one linked on my page, and it's all the non-video essay stuff like tournament footage or fun BS will be going over there. If that interests you, give it a follow. Fuck it, I'm not adding any new footage. You're getting the crumbs from last year's video. I think I kinda hate this game now. The longer you play, the more it becomes apparent that the only thing the game had going for it was the battle system. And maybe that's fine. Like, it's the vision of the game, so they obviously put a lot of effort into that being the focus. But it only makes the failings of the battle system more obvious. It's the lack of information that really ends up killing me. Not being able to see an enemy style percentage feels like a huge hindrance, but with how few skills interact with an enemy style, maybe it's not that big of a deal. What truly sucks is not knowing how long a buff is gonna last. Perfect example, I use Sue as my tank in DPS. One of the most important skills he has is Counter. Counter lasts a set amount of turns, and I have to mentally track those turns because there's nothing on the HUD that would tell me how long I have until I need to reapply Counter. This goes for every non-ailment in the game. There's nothing to tell me who got Alyssa's damage boost and how many turns it has left. Nothing tells me if Clark is in save quit mode. Nothing tells me if Lauren has the wind buff applied. There's just so much additional missing information that makes playing this game, especially on one of the higher difficulties like I'm doing, so much more frustrating than it needs to be. Like, once again, this would maybe be more forgivable if the combat system wasn't literally the only thing in the game worth caring about. I'm also currently on my second boss encounter that does hard confirm status effects when it attacks my party. One was this motherfucker who would reset my character's style to 0 every time it attacked someone, which was fucking crippling, and I had to turn the difficulty all the way down to overcome. And the second of which deals stun and vulnerable with every attack, which is also totally crippling in the same manner. And also, fuck this Mega Dragon mini boss. His gimmick is that he one-shots your party, so you have to devise a way to beat him in like a turn and a half to 2 turns. Which, Okay, if you want to have a gimmick boss like that where you need to sit down and smoke your smart weed to figure out how to best tackle this, that's fine. But then don't make a game that on Party Wipe it only allows you to instantly retry or reload a previous save. For how much this game wants to be flexible and user-friendly, the fact that you can't adjust difficulty or swap party or abilities or gear on death flies in the face of that design. And fucking speaking of gear, I just started getting so mad at the way this game handles weapons and shields. Both weapons and shields can have powerful side effects on them, but because they are also your attack and defense stats, they are scaled out of use by something with bigger numbers. There are a couple exceptions, like Zorvex has a weapon that auto-revives him that is worth keeping around, but there's other stuff like Alyssa who has a weapon where her damage buff applies to the whole party instead of just one person, and that's so cool and allows me to think about my attack and party comp differently, and oh, now I have another weapon that actually does more damage, so I'll just go with that playstyle now because the other one's obsolete. It's just such a mess of a game. Like, there is this real attempt at a super crunchy and engaging battle system, but it's constantly getting in its way and needs so much more polish. And that's a huge issue because everything else in the game is so second thoughts. I can't remember the story because it doesn't matter. Things just happen out of nowhere. Characters are introduced and join the party with a couple lines of establishing dialogue. There is no character development or anything to help pull you along. It's just so frustrating because the game feels like it's close to sticking the landing, but constantly flubs, and I just kept getting mad at it. Welcome to the intermission. Oh, it tastes great. So we're gonna do two things real quick. We're gonna go over some of the manga I read this year because I realized you could read manga on your phone, and that made my quality of life exponentially better. And then we're gonna do the chapter art, the Idolisms contest, the 2021 chapter art. Thank you all very much for voting. Really appreciate it. Let's go over some manga I read this year because there's a lot of cool stuff. Chainsaw Man, generational manga. Don't really know what to say. If you're not reading it, you're fucking up. It's amazing. It's going to be something that's going to define this time period. I don't know a single person who's reading this right now that isn't thinking it's crazy good every single week. Nozoki Anna. A man finds a peephole in his apartment, and when he looks through it, he sees a woman masturbating. And because of that, she starts blackmailing him into all sorts of hilarious pornographic hijinks. Sounds like a weird hentai manga. Is a weird hentai manga, but around the halfway point, you can tell that there's a big shift about to take place, and it gets real good at that point. I was shocked at how much I liked it. Nozo Kimi. This is kind of a spin-off of Nozoki Anna, wherein somewhat of the same premise, a boy accidentally peeps on a girl undressing across the apartment complex from him, and she holds him under similar blackmail. But this is more of a high school ecchi, not monster of the week, girl of the week type manga. Unbelievably shocking how much I loved this. This is the first time I've really felt something that was in like the monster of the week format that I could have just kept reading. Like, normally that format does nothing for me. Like, I was like, okay, come on. I want to get to the bulk of it. I'm one of those fucking people. Yes, I like Cowboy Bebop. I'm not that bad. But Nozo Kimi is consistently funny and entertaining and moving ever so gently forward in a way that makes reading it awesome. And the girl is a fucking gremlin, and I love her. She's such a little piece of shit. It's awesome seeing her, just twist this guy around. Katsu. Is it a boxing manga? Is it a coming of age manga? Is it a romance manga? Sure. It's none of those, though. It's definitely something different. It's about legacy. How do you interpret that? Good question. Teppu. women's MMA circa the turn of the century, the turn of the millennium. Circa the turn of the millennium. This is interesting because instead of having a traditional hero that you're kind of the eyes on view for during this manga, you pretty much are following, like, not the main villain, but like, I think someone described her as like the mid boss. Like, she's kind of a piece of shit, and she knows it, and she's really powerful, and because of that, with this, she picks up MMA really, really fast, and there's this level of like conceitedness to her that makes her engaging. That's the best way to put it. Like, it's really engaging because you don't know if you really want to root for her because she thinks she's hot shit, and that's kind of like the fallible trait of a villain. But because she's so self-confident in her abilities and she's always like right in them, she's like fascinating to watch. Famously, this manga got cut short due to the mangaka's health, but I think it ended at an incredibly good point, and it's like super, super, super worth reading anyways. Like, it is front to back, I'm happy with the ending they got for it. Satomi Senshuu, a boxing manga that doesn't really do much with boxing, but does do a lot with romance. A very talented female boxer in high school immediately starts a relationship. That's like the beginning of the manga. They're dating with a kind of crappy boxer boy, but he's pretty good at coaching. And so it's more of their relationship moving forward. Not a whole ton on like nuts and bolts boxing. Like, this isn't, it doesn't explain boxing very well, if that makes sense. It's more of the vessel for the story, but still super worthwhile. Great climax. Awesome all the way around. Shikimori's not just a cutie. This was the reason I actually started reading manga, because I was watching the anime and I was like, fuck it. This is moving too slow week to week. I'm going to go read the manga. And I liked it more than I thought I would, because normally like romance and like anime and manga kind of is like super hit and miss, and like typically on the miss side for me, because there's just a lot of faffing about. This starts off and they're in a relationship, and it's more about being in a relationship than trying to find a relationship, which I like that. Still a ton of faffing about, a lot of magic girlfriend, just like magic, sweet, pure, innocent, amazing, perfect girlfriend going on. But when it breaks away from that, it becomes way better. It just takes a little time to break away from that. Lucifer and the Biscuit Hammer. I'm so sorry, guys, that you finally got your adaptation, and it sucks ass, because this manga fucking rules. This was awesome. This was unbelievable through and through. Just excellent shonen action. Everything you could want from like the year 2000s style. It made me feel like a kid again kind of reading it, because I knew what like this style and art, it all felt like back in the day. Just like I missed it. So absolutely a huge bummer that people have been waiting forever for it to get an adaptation, and like, they got a complete fucking stinker. But reading this manga was unbelievable. Like, just 10 out of 10. It was awesome. I thought this was like one of the greatest things I read all year, until I fucking read Slam Dunk. Slam Dunk makes Chainsaw Man, makes Lucifer and the Biscuit Hammer, it makes it all look like chump change. Like, I thought those were like 10 out of 10 manga. Like, I read those, I was like, oh my god, this is unbelievable stuff. Slam Dunk makes it look like child's play. It's not even funny how good Slam Dunk is. Like, I've heard Slam Dunk's really good. I know it's very popular. I know it's one of the best sports manga ever made. And even with those accolades, it blows those expectations so far out of the water that there's no way to prepare yourself for Slam Dunk if you've never read it. When, like, 2016, there was that like really crappy Berserk adaptation, like the like super whack looking 3D one. And I remember at the time, my friend told me that they don't really think Berserk needs an animated adaptation, because Berserk is so beautiful, you forget that there's not color. Like, it's all done in black and white ink, but you forget that it's black and white because it is so well drawn that you sense the color still on the pages. Slam Dunk is the loudest manga I've ever read. Maybe the loudest comic, like anything that I've ever read. You are constantly hearing it. Like every basketball ambient sound, like the sneakers hitting the court, the crowd, the cheering, the sweating, the yelling, like you hear all of it the entire time. It's impossible not to. And everything flows and moves with such brilliance, and it's a beautiful page turner. Like it's like Junji Ito, it would set up like scares so that when you flip the page, you know, it's all building intention for that. It's the same thing but with basketball, where you are building this tension and you're seeing this beautiful shot of a basketball court, and you flip the page and it all goes away and there's just a white background and someone dunks and like you drop your fucking phone. Like I don't know how else to describe it. It's just like you can't do anything else. So go read Slam Dunk. Go read Slam Dunk fucking now. It's unbelievable. The Idolisms 2021. The Art of the Year Award. Once again, thank you guys so much for voting on this. Like, if you have any ideas for things about this channel and these videos that you would like to have an award at the end of the year for, please let me know in the comments. I just wanted to do the art for, because I think this is kind of a pretty big visual branding thing for this, but if you want to do video of the year or whatever, let me know. We can maybe work on it next year. We'll see. This is just my idea. And thank you all so much for actually voting on it and participating. That means a lot. So, runner-up this year, 4th place. It is a 3-way tie. Panic at the Arcade chapter art from Talking About Kicks Until We Aren't. Expected to see this high up there. It's a really, really good one. Very proud of this. The thumbnail from Recreating the Age of Discovery with the Sega Saturn. Also expected to see this one. It was probably tied for my favorite piece this year. I think this was one of my favorites. And Perceived Difficulty chapter art from This Is Not a King of Fighters 13 trial video. Shocked, actually. Really shocked to see this one up here. Kind of thought this one was going to fade into the background real easy. I didn't think it had a lot of staying power. So, really shocked to see this one. Kind of cool, though. In 3rd place, we have a three-way tie. The Ugly chapter art from Perils of Necromancy. Interesting. Interesting choice. I like this one, but I did not expect it. Cyberdoll chapter art from Recreating the Age of Discovery with the Sega Saturn. Someone actually commented and said this was their favorite, and I'm really, really shocked and just like, whoa, like heartwarming to hear that, because I thought this was one of my throwaway ones, and to see a lot of people like it means a lot. It's you know, as an artist, you're like, I don't know if I like this, but seeing that maybe something you make isn't your cup of tea, but someone else responds to it, it's a really cool feeling. And the final one, D4DJ chapter art from Gaming in the 2021st year. This was my favorite art of the year. This was pretty easily my number one. I thought this slammed. This was so cool, and I'm glad to see that it made it into medal position. 2nd place is a 2-way tie. We have the thumbnail art from Talking About Kicks Until We Aren't. Not shocked to see this one high up there. I think this is everything you could want in a thumbnail, like to a T. I think everything about this is laid out perfectly. It's captivating. It's something to draw you in. It's very easily readable from a distance. And the Jantai Battle Cosplayer chapter art from Recreating the Age of Discovery with the Sega Saturn. Really shocked to see this one up here. I'm guessing it's the color scheme, because the color scheme's very appealing, but I had no idea people like this one. I thought this was another somewhat throwaway piece. I think it's very attractive, but like there's not like a big focal point to really draw your eye on the way that I normally would like there to be. So shocked, honestly, to see this one. And the number one winner, standing alone at the top of the mountain, no ties here, number one place, gold medal, S chapter art from Talking About Kicks Until We Aren't. Not entirely shocked to see this one. I think this is a striking piece. I think with so little that needs to be said on it, that it is immediately evocative. Your eye only has one place to go, and I think it's just something that like you're gonna remember. You know, that's the point. You're gonna remember it. So, congratulations to S chapter art from Talking About Kicks Until We Aren't. You are the winner of the 2021 Idolisms Chapter Art of the Year. Thank you again, everyone, for voting. Let's get back to the video. I've wasted enough of your fucking time. I am almost certain that, based on my interests, we are going to get at least one golf game a year on this series. So this year's golf entry is A Little Golf Journey. That said, much like this year's breakout anime hit Birdie Wing, it may wear the skin of golf, but really only uses it as a coat of paint. Little Golf Journey is kinda strange. It's more like Marble Madness through the lens of golf while in the structure of Overcooked. Every level is this small golf map that you need to complete. The amount of strokes you use, and honestly, that's me backporting actual golf terminology because the game doesn't address it as such, will determine how many stars you get for that hole. It is almost impossible not to look at this game structure and see Overcooked, as it is following that game's formula like 1-to-1. The golfing itself is also maybe the least golf influenced I've ever seen. There is no 2-click or 3-click system, no shot influence, no hooks or slices. Instead, you just kind of have a set distance you can shoot within. There is a power shot that is a static distance beyond your normal range, and you can use focus to straighten out your shot because, especially when doing a power shot, you have a sway going on, not too dissimilar to how FPS games used to handle sniper rifles. All of this makes for a strangely non-golf feeling, while still attempting to wear the skin of the game. It's not a bad thing. It's just very different, at least at first. Because your verb set is so small, you eventually realize that you need to use the sway to make bigger shots because it will sway further than your focused shot can go. This starts getting frustrating as dialing in a difficult shot is a matter of timing and guesswork. It doesn't help that the game feels like it starts running out of ideas pretty quickly, and with so few ways of interacting with the golf ball, things start feeling a tad bit repetitive at best and frustrating at worst. The game constantly asks precision from you without giving you the tools to be precise. This, alongside the emphasis on hunting for secrets in the map, makes for a slightly inelegant feeling that the game is mostly a small staged puzzler a la Captain Toad, but with a control scheme that makes for aggravating completion of each map. It almost begins to share DNA from the dark side of point-and-click games. Getting full stars eventually feels impossible as possible lines for perfect completion look incomprehensible. You will spend time pixel hunting, so to speak, attempting to line up the shot in exactly the way the game needs. And fucking help you if you beef a shot a couple strokes in and want to restart, because then you need to spend Sunday at the chapel praying that you can make the harebrained, nonsensical loop-de-loop and pull-ass shot again. It's maddening, and it stops being fun and purely begins being a frustrating chore to play. Like, puzzle games are not so liquid like this. Blocks line and lock up. Rules make sense, but this starts asking you to make form of the formless so often that I wanted to stop playing. Many levels have secrets you can scour the map for. Unlocking a secret path will open up these blue things. That's literally what they're called. For you to find as well. With my frustration exponentially building, I kind of stopped fucking caring to find them. The game doesn't earn its experience. It's too finicky to be rewarding. The music's too bland and generic to evoke the comfortable mood it's looking for. There's this love song of day and night ass story going on that I cannot possibly care about. And the levels are not visually interesting enough to spend time trying to explore. I'm beyond bummed because I was looking forward to playing this, but I ended up stopping at the halfway point because, frankly, it stopped being any amount of fun and just felt like a meticulous chore. And that's saying something because I finished Clannad, but I gave up on this. So A Little Golf Journey is bequeathed the prestigious award of Stubbed Toe of the Year for the worst game I've played. Man, I love the 2D Metroidvania with the Dark Souls mechanical structure. Chocolate and peanut butter, baby. So Blasphemous works a little more on the Metroidvania side than the Dark Souls side, which is nice to see. You don't have a whole system where you collect souls as a level up currency and thusly lose potential progress when you die like an idiot. Instead, this game has you lose a bit of your MP bar when you die, and it will only return if you go collect your guilt? Okay, we gotta talk about this. Blasphemous is the most noun-dense game around. This game is saying the most amount of words. Everything is this Catholic proper noun wankfest, and it makes the writing of this game impossible to parse because every noun is fighting with the others for attention in your brain. You are not a hollow. You are, O penitent one of silence. They aren't healers. They are kissers of wounds. It isn't the Forbidden Library. It's the Library of Neglected Words. As much as games like this are legally required under threat of imprisonment to have deep lore, Blasphemous is such a struggle to follow because everyone is just saying words. This might be the game that shows up Salt and Sanctuary for the most amount of word saying, and that game had a boss called That Stench Most Foul. While Salt and Sanctuary is catching strays, marionette-ass looking game, let's talk about how beautiful Blasphemous is because fuck. These are some goddamn animations, dude. Even just random enemies have a fluidity to them that feels like they are flexing on people. Like, goddamn, chill, bro. And then you get cutscenes which are just like, mwah. I love the shading. I love the movement. I don't know why, but it reminds me of Out of This World. Totally different visual technique, but something about the way it looks and animates reminds me of it, and that's a pretty good old compliment because Out of This World still looks killer. But yeah, back to the gameplay. So what happens when you die twice? Well, you get another effigy thing you have to pick up because MP loss will stack with multiple deaths. It's a neat way to play with the death and rebirth structure of Dark Souls. Other mechanical aspects of the game are a little less cohesive. Combat and movement feel a little bit gummy and ungraceful. Parrying is done well, but sometimes you'll run into enemies you can't parry, or enemies you don't automatically counterattack when parrying, or how you can't parry projectiles, unless you can. I unlocked an aerial downstab that just doesn't work the way I want it to. You have to attack in the air first, and then you can downstab, which greatly limits how graceful it feels. And then there was this tooltip on screen that tried to describe how to double jump, kinda. And thank Christ I was recording footage when this happened because I had to watch the footage back to see what I'm supposed to do, and then like it became relevant hours later in exactly one instance. Like it's helpful against some more aerial enemies, but as far as traversal or puzzle solving, I think it comes into play literally one time. The game has executions on enemies and they are really pretty, but it's not intuitive what the damage threshold that causes it is. There's this really nice dodge slide, but some enemies you can dodge through and some you can't, and it's not really obvious what the rhyme or reason is. Like bigger dudes that are otherwise unavoidable are usually the ones you can dodge through, but it's just that you have two defensive verbs in the form of parry and dodge, and it's not really signposted what's the intended answer for what. You can upgrade to get a nice big slash out of slide, but if you do it too early, you break and you do a regular slash, and it has this dead zone where you just pass through the enemy without hitting them, so it's kind of finicky and unreliable at times. Manslaying is your main platforming action to help you traverse the stages, but it feels so floaty and weightless. Like there's no faith your little dude's gonna successfully snap to the corner properly. Also, okay, so when you die, you lose all your MP. Makes sense. Death is a punishment, don't get hit. But you have a natural ability to sacrifice health for MP, so anytime you die, you can just refill your MP and then refill your health again. Yes, this costs tears, but at points in the game, tears feel weirdly useless because the only meaningful thing you do with them, buy items or upgrades, are kind of just not online, so it feels like a useless resource you can just burn on MP with no feeling of penalty. This doesn't ruin the game or anything. It just makes it, let's say, needlessly ungraceful. In a genre where a lot of the fun is discovering stuff, figuring out how the core mechanics work shouldn't really be part of that experience. But over time you will understand it, so it's not like ruining the game. But also once you do have an understanding of everything, the game just kind of just feels flat. Unlike a more standard Metroidvania, you don't really get a swath of new abilities to open up more corners of the map, and combat feels muddy and unengaging. So, like when you clear an area, it's not like you get a double jump or something and your brain goes, oh, I know X, Y, and Z locations where I could use this. You get a proper noun of the most importance for real, and then you have to rack your brain to parse where it could be useful. And fuck, man, I cannot care about the story. The world and lore building of the story of Blasphemous are complete whiffs on me. What makes Dark Souls lore work is that it's presented as incomplete microfiction. You read a sentence, maybe two, and then you have to kind of chew on what that means. Much like Salt and Sanctuary, Blasphemous wants me to sit down like a good little boy and read a fucking book. I like the general aesthetic, but the overly verbose nature of every character feels like a replacement for actual characters in a lot of cases. And even then, when you do have characters, they all just kind of feel like troubled sinners who need to repent. There isn't this range of energies. The thing that makes the overwhelming depression of the Souls games work is that not everyone is like that. You have crafty bastards like Patches. You have gallant rays of sunshine. Pun fucking intended. Like Solaire. In so many ways, Blasphemous just feels flat. It's not bad, but it really lacks the sense of high points that the games it is obviously influenced from have. Like so many places feel samey because everything in this game is in service of the Catholic vibe. There are unique locations, but a solid amount of zones feel like differently painted cathedrals. It just doesn't reach out and grab me very often. Outside of some incredibly gorgeous artwork and views, Blasphemous is just okay. It's fine. And that shouldn't damn it to a shallow grave, but being just okay or just fine doesn't cut it when you are playing in the territories of Super Metroid, Dark Souls, and Hollow Knight. I swear, Blasphemous isn't that bad of a game, but everything that sticks out to me about it is a negative. I just have nothing but complaints on the forefront when playing, and whack memories when I was finished. More like Momidora. Okay, so if you were one of the, 200 people that watched the runners-up video in my top 5 favorite video game series, which I swear I haven't abandoned, you might recall that when talking about Third Strike, I name-dropped Guilty Gear Xrd. It was a game I loved, but I think I said something along the lines of my competitive time with the game being over. See, the reason for that is because Xrd works on delay-based netcode, which makes a game as precise as Xrd nearly impossible to play online, especially when you are in the Midwest like me. The newest Guilty Gear, Strive, was made with rollback netcode, a vastly superior style of netplay implementation that makes highly competitive fighting games possible in an online setting. The oldest Guilty Gear, Plus R, was also retrofitted with rollback netcode, so Xrd became this red-headed stepchild. Both the games before and after Xrd were playable, but Xrd was still stuck in the past. The game is alive in more metropolitan areas and in places with better infrastructure, but once again, Midwest. What makes this even more depressing is that it was deemed kind of impossible to ever have Xrd retrofitted the same way Plus R was. According to highly reliable sources like Zynac, Xrd would practically have to be rebuilt to ever be playable with rollback, and with Xrd being a dead series in terms of developer support, this was an accepted nail in the coffin for the game. It would be forever lost to the past as the rest of the series continued towards the future. And then CE Otaku 2022 happened. I know this channel has finally expanded outside of my large fighting game-centric popularity, so I don't know if I can properly describe what this feels like. But if I had to compare the magnitude of what Xrd getting rollback feels like Imagine PT was just announced as being free and available again. This was never supposed to happen. We had every reason to give up hope that Xrd would have a reliable net play infrastructure, but my god, it was real and it works. Xrd Rollback is the game of the year 2022. It's not even close. Everything that advanced me in the fighting game community, both in my skill and in name recognition, came from Xrd. It was the first point where I ever became competitively good at something. I was no world beater, god, far from it, but I could be competitive. I could do more than just 0-2 or 2-2. I could win money matches. I had rivalries. I was chosen to be part of a regional exhibition like the Team Summit at the Combo Breaker 2016. And I didn't blow it. I won a match on stage. Maybe I am much more known competitively as a Merkava player in Under Night, as I did better in that game, but I wouldn't be there if not for my success in Xrd, and having to say goodbye to that part of my life sucked. It's easy when Xrd is the hottest game around to find people to play with, to suffer with the netcode, but once it gets a little bit in the rear view, it was so difficult to keep a grip on it. During the pandemic, a Midwest-focused Xrd series was started, and I was so fucking excited to play in it. I spent the week so geeked for it, and god, the day of, I could barely concentrate at work. Nothing mattered, because once I got home, I had a reason to play Xrd. But then I got in the bracket and I nearly cried. My connections were unplayable, absolutely unplayable. I was spiking to 7 frames of delay with someone a state away who I personally knew. I was crushed beyond words. I had built up the idea of being able to engage with one of my favorite games again, and it had delivered nothing but disappointment and depression. And I never have to experience that again. It works now. I can play against people. Fuck, I was getting 3 frames to 4 frames against people in the UK, people across a motherfucking ocean. Maybe not the best delay, but that's incredibly playable for people in another fucking country. There was a reason to play Xrd again. The game wouldn't betray me. The time I wanted to spend with it would now be worth it. We could run tournaments again, do long sets with other people, and meaningfully learn. We could have a healthy online ecosystem that translates to a healthy offline ecosystem. But it's not just that the game is better now. I am better now. My time spent playing games like Under Night and King of Fighters 14 and 15 allowed me to approach games differently and think in new ways that I could apply backwards to Xrd. Previously in Xrd, I was plateauing for years. I was so aggressive with a character that didn't always want to do that, but as my friend once evergreenly pointed out, I was playing like I was afraid of neutral. But now I have a better grasp of how to play to my strengths, and my brain could identify and adapt. Previously, when I was getting mixed, my brain would just read it like TV static. Like, I knew the mix was coming, but I didn't really think about it critically. I more just reacted to it as it happened to me. But now I can mentally gather data and feel like I'm approaching my weaknesses in an engaged way. I'm smarter, I'm better, I'm more varied, I'm thinking in ways that are not linear. I'm evolving. That's why Xrd Rollback is the game of the year. It's not just that one of the games I love is alive again, but that I, as a human, am better now. Games are entertainment and there's nothing wrong with that, but my nearly decade-long journey with Xrd hasn't ended. I'm not an old dog that can't be taught new tricks. I have mentally evolved into a smarter person, and that's the most fucking insane shit a game can give me. It makes me want to cry. It almost scares me. Being in my 30s and so many things going wrong with my body had kinda broken me down to believe that my best days were all behind me. But now I have proof, in thanks to Xrd Rollback, that I can continue to be a growing and evolving player. Dark Cloud 1 was originally going to get this spot, but everything surrounding Xrd Rollback, from the impossibility of it ever happening to how it's allowed me to reflect and grow, makes it a lock for the greatest video game this year. That's my year in gaming, y'all. What's really funny about this list is that, like, for most of the year it was really, really tiny. Like, almost all of this was played in the second half of 2022. By the time we were at the halfway mark, all I had played was Master Duel and an incomplete run of Dark Souls 3. Being an adult fucking sucks, bro. Stupid ass responsibilities. As far as what I played, it was a bit more of a light year for success. The game of the year had to go to Exert Rollback for the momentous occasion of it existing, but the year was otherwise really held up by Dark Cloud 1. That game was just so shockingly good, and the more I played of it, the better it kept getting. Okay, so, alright, so 2023, what's on the docket? Well, if you watched last year's Roundup episode, you'll remember that I ended the video talking about my excitement for Spirit Swap. That shit didn't come out this year, so looks like I am once again excited for it to come out as the next year rolls on. Also, I swore I mentioned Bomb Rush Cyberpunk last year, but I guess I didn't. It's in the exact same spot Spirit Swap is. Supposed to come out in 2022, got delayed to 2023, so once again I'm excited for the same thing. Also, last year I teased a script that was 90% done and that you, quote, would never see coming, end quote. It's a Persona 5 video in case you somehow didn't catch that bombshell hint. The problem is that I have to finish the game to properly finish the script, and I have just had so many more enjoyable and creative ideas this year. I still want to finish it at some point because I think I have a really interesting read on the game, but don't be shocked if that shit still gets wildly delayed. I already have 5+ potential scripts in the hopper that could be finished and turned into videos before that. It's really funny. During the first year, I was kind of racking my brain for good topics, but this year it's like, oh fuck, get out of the way. I got another banger in the making, cooking up my brain cells, baby. Let's go. Anyways, I'll try to get to it, but don't be shocked if you don't see it. The top 5 favorite video games in Final Fantasy series are not dead. I am trying to prioritize the next top 5 video, and you'll see why it took so long when it comes out. And I swear I want to do more Final Fantasy games. I just don't want to fucking play Final Fantasy 2, man. You tell me I gotta work my day job, do all my adult responsibilities, and then in my precious free time play Final Fantasy 2? Fuck that. Alright, this shit's gone on long enough. Hope you had a good year. See you on the other side, y'all.